Serious, those of you who worked undercover, what is the most taboo thing you witnessed but could not intervene as to not blow your cover? Working as a secret shoplifter for a large retail chain, I would basically test loss prevention and see what I could get out of a store. The total would be tallied up and taken off the store manager's bonus. So they had to be on their game. One thing I used to do was steal copper electrical cable sold by the foot. I would drag it to the fence and spool it up in my car parked on the other side. This was fun to me and an obvious catch for the store. I go outside to the wire rack and there is the store manager getting a blowjob from a cashier. They spotted me and quickly went back inside to leave me alone. I then went ahead and spooled out the wire as planned. Not one but the entire inventory, to the point my car started to get lower under the weight. I went in and bought something and went to the cashier I saw with the SM. I asked her how long she had been there. She replied, "For a couple of weeks now. It's just part-time until I go back to high school for my junior year." I then went back to the SM and identified myself and what I saw in private. The cashier was the daughter of a friend of his and is only 16. He was 37. I gave him 2 weeks to find another job or I would be back and blow it all up. He not only left in 1 week but left the state entirely. Hindsight, I should have called the police but I didn't. This was about 20 years ago. Several people asked how I got this job. It was not a permanent job. It was part of management training every manager had to do for a week at a time. What was stolen would be totaled up and returned to the store. In the case of the copper wire, I was able to get over $2,500 worth of wire. A friend of mine got ridiculous with it. He stole a riding lawnmower once and had a carryout help him load it in his truck. He then went back and stole the shoplifters will be prosecuted sign and had the carryout take his picture holding the sign sitting on the lawnmower. At Christmas time he would steal large outdoor figurines and fill the back of his truck. He had like 15 to 20 Santas, Frosties, and reindeer in the back of his truck. Edit 2. A lot of people have been calling out my decision at the time bad judgment or a bro code thing. At the time, I was in my early 20s and didn't have the best decision making skills. The girl in question didn't act like a victim as much as a willing participant. He could have at least been fired, charged with child seduction, etc. For those of you calling BS, it did happen and much more than you would think. Our tellers from retail would fill up with half of the crap that went on there. This was back in the early 1990s before social media. Those of you guessing the store correctly know what goes on there. It was a corporate thing and a horrible company to work for. They are still around but I don't think they employ these practices anymore. Edit 3. One more story about my friend. Once he walked out of the front of the store with a stolen 24 feet extension ladder. He then leaned it on the front of the store and climbed up next to the giant lighted sign and had a carryout take his picture while on the ladder. He was nuts. So I can answer this one. I do social engineering for financial institutions, banks, credit unions etc. I went to a credit union in Texas where the entire place failed on a miserable basis for security. I walked in with a fake badge that stated I worked for a made-up company and I was there to an inspection of the building. I dressed in a polo and khaki pants with matching colors to my badge and walked into the front desk. The girl there was probably in college or just out of school. She immediately let me into the back room and I walked into offices and desks that were unoccupied but located in rooms with other employees. I walked up to empty computers and used unplugged USB drives in. Huge no. And began typing random things into computers and taking pictures of myself at the computers. Employees would literally look at my and go back to their jobs without thinking anything of a guy taking selfies at their friend's work desk. Once I had been in every office, I went to the vice president's office and opened her desk and looked through files to find personal people's information. Found tons. I went into the file room and took personal loan documents off the shelf and took pictures of myself accessing them. When I was done, I walked to the person who had contracted my company and laid out all the information I had found and all the things I had done, and the guy just sighed. This scenario has happened a couple of different times. Most places fail somehow. Sometimes it's fun and interesting. Sometimes it's boring and there's nothing worth staying. Edit. I should mention that to answer Arp's question, everything I did is a huge taboo for the organization in my industry. If the organization above had followed their compliance rules and regulations, I would have been escorted out within 5 minutes or not even let in the building to begin with. Towards the end of this particular engagement, I was practically begging for someone to catch me. Worked as a ghost passenger for an airline. Basically, I flew around and graded flight attendants' performance. While still parked at the gate with the door open, one flight attendant began berating passengers who were using their smartphones, which was completely permitted at the gate. She threatened to have the person in front of me thrown off the plane if she didn't put hers away. She also threatened me. After we left the gate and were taxiing to the runway, I looked back to see her sitting in her jump seat using her phone. Took a photo of it and included that in my report. She initially denied using the phone and claimed I was being unruly on the aircraft. After she saw the photo, she changed her tune. I worked as a secret shopper for a while for a small store. The most egregious thing I found were employees would hide inventory if they knew a sale was coming up. I'd also go in and ask questions about what equipment I should use just to test their general knowledge. Most failed, but there were young kids getting paid it, so I felt bad squealing on them. I also forgot to add that I had to put up with being hit on by teenagers and creepy older guys. I had to play along and see if they knew their its despite throwing terrible game. I work as a researcher studying illegal wildlife trade. In markets, I have seen critically endangered animals being sold openly for pretty low prices. I've also seen plenty of animals dead or dying in these markets with no food or water in the baking sun. But worse than that, I have friends who have had to watch slow lorises having their teeth pulled out with nail clippers and not been able to do anything. Helped manufacture methamphetamine so that I could get arrested with the suspects and spend time in the cells to discover how the drugs were being brought into the prisons. Was recruited due to my work circumstances, age and environment. Had to change provinces when I was finished with the deal. Edit. Apostrophe removed. States now provinces. Decided to do an AMA. Will post some stuff and answer any questions about the system. Woot woot. My first gold. Thanks. I used to investigate insurance fraud. The one thing I saw that made me the maddest was when I was working in the rundown area near the Philly Zoo and saw a strung out mother walking with her toddler and jerking his arm and screaming at him for not keeping up with her quick walking pace. The kid was not even 2 years old. I really wanted to get out of the car. The funniest one was where I had to go undercover in a bar to investigate this one person. You ever see the Stallone movie Over the Top? Yeah. That's pretty much what this guy ended up doing right on the bar, right in front of my hidden camera, and looking direct into my camera lens. It was awesome. The arm wrestling match went on for minutes, and this by a guy too hurt to work. At times it was very entertaining to work undercover. I worked for an armored car service for a while as an undercover guard. When a place had a lot of money or if it was a risky area, 2 plainclothes guards would arrive before the truck. I would scout the place and outside to make sure the uniform guys could get in and out safe. We wore a color of the day and the local cops knew who we were, as did the uniformed guards. It was a pretty easy job and I only once waved off a pickup because of a bunch of Latin kings sitting on benches out front. I hung out a while to see what was going on and hoping they would leave so we could make the pickup. As I sat on a bus bench across the road, I watched one of the guys take out his needlepoint. I never would think that a gang member would tote his needlepoint to a stick-up job. Edit. Only the top paragraph showed up. I guess I ducked up format or something. I'm not good on my phone. I once took my vehicle to an independent shop for routine maintenance. I said I was dropping it off for as long as it might take as I was going to take a long trip the following month. I sat across the street in a diner eating soup and drinking coffee. I got a call that my vehicle needed about $4,500 worth of work an hour and a half later. It never left the parking spot. I told them I didn't want anything done. They said it was half a part already. Duck, you Firestone. I am an assistant service manager at a dealership. That Firestone was turned into a parking lot. When I worked QA for a video game publisher, they had me work an E3 as a secret player. Basically, I got to play new games for that publisher and act like they were amazing in front of press. While I was taking a break, I saw one of the producers hooking up with a booth babe. He didn't recognize me, but I knew he was married and had a kid on the way. I didn't say it. He got laid off when the rest of us did about a year later. But that's just kinda how E3 goes. Was secret shopping at a high-end restaurant. Around $100 per plate. The busser came over and refilled my water glass that I had already drank out of and overfilled it. So he poured part back in the pitcher from my glass and proceeded to refill everyone else at the table from the same pitcher. I really wanted to throw a fit, but could only include it in my report. I am a private investigator, contracted by governments to check massage shops to see if they're soliciting. I usually get sent to shops which have had multiple complaints and an investigation is in its final stages and they need evidence to support their case. So, I go to one place. Everything seems normal except for being asked to strip bare for an oil massage. Eventually I am asked to flip over. Therapist without asking just starts rubbing some gel on my parts. At this point, I am obligated to refuse and finish the session. I ask her to stop but halfway through the sentence I am hit with the most intense pain. Turns out, she was new and was unaware that alcohol gel is not the same as massage oil. Long story short, manager was convicted of coercing staff on the basis of their visas being revoked if they didn't comply, and I had to stand in court and tell the events of that day. I am so late to this party, but here it goes. I'm a TV producer. I was working on a popular documentary a while ago. We were following a woman who was addicted to heroin and had resorted to prostitution in order to make money to support her habits. One day, a friend of hers got thrown into jail. She decided she needed to work really hard to bail him out. So she called her friend who owned a crack house that he let girls like her turn tricks in at about $10 a pop. To answer Arp's question, I witnessed this girl share needles with many people and watched as John after John came into the house and disappeared into the bedroom with her for a little bit. Former loss prevention here. Best job ever by the way. Witnessed so much sex in the stockrooms. Couples, singles, trios, you name it. We had cameras everywhere of course, especially in the stockrooms due to rampant employee theft. We had countless hours of employee sex on tape. We couldn't reveal the cameras, which would tip off the thieves, so all we could do was watch. From 2007 through 2008 I worked on a smuggling interdiction task force. My team dealt with human trafficking. My job was all bullet and I regret that we couldn't really do anything to put a dent in the problem. I worked undercover in that I did not wear a uniform or carry a badge and my authority was civilian so I only reported to LEAs. The most taboo thing I witnessed that I was not allowed to do anything about was women, mothers, aunts, grandmothers, offering children for sex in exchange for cash. The truth of the matter is that, at least in Western society, the threshold of evidence required to hold women responsible for sex trafficking is not even in the same ballpark as for men. The number of cases we had to tolerate sickens me. I don't know which we need to address first as a society, the rampant abuse or the gender bias that keeps it going. But the truth be told, I met just as many women pimps and abusers as I did men. The biggest difference I could see is that women were more often pimping out the under 12 demographic versus the male pimps that were pimping out the teens. I never saw one female prosecuted, but we were successful in moving a handful of kids to foster care. Couple showed up to a party with their kids. Boy about 11, girl around 9. Get paid by host. Have kids do it with each other for entertainment of some of the people present. For further tips let a couple sickers join in after a few minutes. Kids have been safely wards of the state for several years now for your information. I worked as a HIPAA inspector for a bit. It is scary. I'd go in and say I was looking for my mom that they called me she was in an accident. I was early 20s. Pretty much every place I went gave me all kinds of protected info on the patient. The company would have placed fake records in the computer. One smaller urgent care place was like HM. No one with that name, here's our sign-in log for the week. Take a look. With last names, first names and reason for visit. Yikes. I used to training at a call center. I always included being aware of social engineering attempts in my role plays. Management liked this so much they started having me do this as a secret caller. I hate to say but I got a lot more people than I should have. Even started doing it ad hoc for other divisions when word got round. Worst was an agent that I'm not sure if she really just didn't care or was just so overly helpful she didn't think twice. But man, I could have stolen 3 or 4 people identities if I was actually running a scam. Worked as a private investigator for a while. Mostly did work comp cases, seen some shiftiness. Drug deals, etc. Worst thing was conducting surveillance on a person at an apartment complex. Get there before light to set up my rig. Little bit before sunrise, this Mexican couple, 50s-ish, in a truck pull up in front of my position. Guy's pulling a trailer, gets out, rummage through dumpster for metal and stuff. Okay, not so bad. Then the woman with him gets out and between my vehicle and said dumpster proceeds to pop a squat and it on the ground. Way to start my morning, guys. Thanks. Edit. Spells good. I was running a wire. We were looking to arrest a guy who beat a 2-year-old so bad she had broken femurs. We wired up mom and had her go to the boyfriend's house and try and get him to confess. Mom started out great. Led the boyfriend along and started to ducking blow him. He then ducked her. The man who beat her daughter so bad she was life-lighted. She ducked him on wire. I was punching my dashboard and wishing I could arrest her as well. It was awful. I was working a detail a few years back in the Parks district of our county. We've had complaints and issues with men engaged in sexual activity in vehicles and restrooms. I volunteered to be a decoy with a wire to see if the issue was out of hand. I was hanging out in my vehicle and decided to go near the men's restroom for a bit. It wasn't long when a vehicle with out of county plates parked, an elderly gentleman driving. I kept my position at the restroom entrance when he walked up. I could tell he wasn't there to use the restroom. He chose the first stall and acted as if he had to urinate. Then I heard it. He was masturbating pretty vigorously and the sound was awful. He leaned back out of the stall to see if I was still there. I wanted to get the hell out of there. The look on his face, licking his lips with drool running down his chin. I'm not quite clear of the conversation, but he either finished or lost interest. As he was walking out of the restroom, he reached out and grabbed my twig and berries. I froze, was shocked and didn't know what to do from there. My partners were in an enclosed garage watching and listening to the entire thing. After running this guy's information, it came back the car belonged to a diocese out of Dayton, Ohio, and the elderly male was the priest. I never volunteered for that again. Edit spelling. IDK if I'd count this as me being undercover, but I'll give it a whirl. I used to own a game store where we buy and sell MTG cards in Maryland. There was a big tournament in Pittsburgh the weekend before where someone's collection was stolen, worth a few $1,000s. That day, we were visited by someone we'd never seen in the store before looking to sell a collection. A collection matching the description of the stolen collection. I told them that we were interested but needed to set up a longer time to sit down and look through the collection. We set up a time for the next Tuesday and they went on their way. We then called the police in Pittsburgh, who connected us with the detective. He worked with our local Montgomery County police and they set up a sting. There were 3 cops in the store pretending to play. One actually knew how and is now a regular, and 2 more cars outside. When the guy came into the store, I did exactly what I would have done with a regular collection. Rung it up, negotiated and paid the guy for the collection. Once the money exchanged hands, the cops busted him. Collection was returned to the kid in Pittsburgh and the guy ended up with some plea deal involving probation. I made my partner blow me. Well, not exactly, but we were on a midnight following a burglary team. We were sitting in our unmarked auto in an alleyway when they made us. I had no other play except to grab Richie by the back of the head and shove it into my lap. One of the team comes up to the car, says something unfortunate about our assumed sexualities and proceeded to knock the place over. These guys were in the cells all night screaming that we were blowing each other. The bad guys went away for a little while. I got to write the most epic report in the history of policing and Mike got a medal for blowing me. Nice. Working as a pie. Without giving too many details, I was a part of a drug-happy orgy a pair of unfit parents set up. Had my partner do the drugs off camera with the excuse of me having a drug test for my job, so I couldn't partake in that. 10+ people there, mostly in couples, and I ended up screwing the unfit mother and recorded her getting sandwiched at her home and plenty of other things. Needless to say, the kids aren't in that house anymore. Ended up quitting after that job. kinda ducked with my head. The money was kind of ridiculous at times though. Edit. It was a custody case. The children went with their bio father who had been fighting for them for a long time. Pretty late to the party, but I was an undercover assets protection specialist at Target for a year in my early 20s. The main taboo thing I noticed, and one of the reasons I wound up hating it and ultimately quitting, is the whole security industry is racist as duck. Everyone from the uniformed guards at the door to the police that did the arrests. We had policies in place to prevent targeting minorities, but it didn't do anything. Nearly every time we called the police to arrest a black person, they would at minimum get tackled, even if they weren't resisting. We had one white guy who was addicted to heroin that we had caught stealing video games several times, and had even punched my boss, and he was arrested so gently you would have thought he was made of porcelain. That job wore on my soul, for real. Like some others here, I also worked as a private detective. Nothing too taboo that I couldn't intervene in, but when you do mostly workman's comp, there's a lot of completely despicable it going on. Other times, you get some weird it. Some examples. 1. There was a guy we were watching that was completely dominating some handicap competitions in the state. He really sold the handicap. Big time. The only time he broke character was when he would stand up and unload his wheelchair from his van, in his privacy fenced backyard. 2. Where are all of the school district's computers going? To people who buy them from the security guards at the warehouse. That one actually made the news. 3. Where is all this soda going? To the truck drivers. This one I actually was interviewed and hired into the company to watch what happens on night shift. I finally have one. I was JTF6 and we covertly patrolled for drug harvesting activity, aka drug plots. My partner and I had eyes on this one location. We had to observe them for a period of time to generate a decent salute report. We see this wild ass road warrior oogla looking kid come hauling ass up on his dirt bike with who we thought was his mom or grandma. Then we witness some incestuous or at the very least underage relations by the feral kid and the she beast he brought with him. The whole time we're just sitting there in our hide grossed out and unable to move or intervene or we'd blow our cover and the whole op. I've had to do some forensic PC work. Seen bodies mishandled by funeral staff. Psychologists molesting their patients. Veterinarians torturing animals. Dentists killing children with unnecessary anesthesia. Doctors filling a man's chest with metal stents for no reason. Older doctors that are clearly incompetent cutting up some poor guy indiscriminately. I know I see the worst of the worst, but it is enough to make me not want to go to a medical professional until I absolutely have to. Even then it is iffy. Edit. All of these cases have the full attention of legal authorities. All of them took place several years ago. Anyone who could be charged has been charged. I don't know if this counts, but when I was in high school over 15 years ago I worked at a KFC. The manager wanted me to keep an eye out on workers and report back to her. She wanted to know who was stealing boxes of stuff, potato and gravy, chicken salt etc. She conveyed that my actions would be looked upon very favorably and perhaps even lead to a better position eventually, like management, if I acted as spy. I told the guy who was doing it that I was meant to be a spy. He thanked me and gave me 5 big bags of chicken salt, heaps of coleslaw and potato and gravy. I got so sick of that it's so quick that I gave most of it away to my relatives. I lived in a pretty poor working class area, so did my relatives, so they were stoked cause they loved KFC. I don't think she found out what we did, so I guess I didn't blow my cover as a double agent. Did physical security for a while. Was on a temp contract with a school district for about 6 months. Witnessed a cop getting BJs from a 14-year-old girl that I knew was a freshman and was just trying to make friends. I chat with her and the other students as I'd walk around on my patrols. So I stealthily recorded the act. It recorded to an SD card and reported it to my superiors, but here's where it gets crazy. The day after my report, I was arrested and charged with obstruction of justice and production of illegal material and was thrown in a cell for a few hours. They kicked the out of me quite a bit, lost a few teeth, and refused me access to a phone to contact a lawyer. I was able to finally get a kind female police secretary to let me use the phone and get the lawyer to bail me out. Case is still pending, but holy it if that wasn't insane. Luckily for me, the phone and SD card were encrypted and the police couldn't do it about it. I'd also been fortunately paranoid enough to send a duplicate on a USB drive, unencrypted, to a friend ahead of time and asking them to hold on to it just in case. They had no idea what they had. There's a reason that whistleblowers and law enforcement don't get along. Next time I'm just throwing that it up on WikiLeaks and letting the media frenzy handle it instead. Not ever worth the it I went through. I completely quit physical security after that and did only IT security from that time onward. It is quite less hassle. Duck the police. Filthy power hungry pigs. Never trust them again in my life. Update. The 8th of September 2016. Just an update to the comment responses. I personally despise and don't trust any police because of my experiences. That's just me. You do you, and I'm not here to tell anyone to do illegal it. If you are a minority, just don't ever depend on police to bother to help you. Any good cop stories I've heard are likely because the person telling them are the same race type they are, or they are a relative family member. Due to legal reasons I can't comment on currently pending stuff. So I don't know what's happened, but let's just say I'm staying the duck away from anything involving police or physical security work for the rest of my life. Also edited to clarify, the kind female lady was not an officer but a secretary at the station that heard me yelling for a lawyer and wanted to make sure I wasn't in physical pain. She was new on the job apparently and was shocked that I had been denied a phone. I don't know if she's still working at that station or not. My honest advice to anyone doing whistleblower reports on the police is to get it on video audio. Have encrypted backups with trusted friends or an online repository, like Mega, and use an encrypted VPN to put that it up on WikiLeaks. Don't bother doing things by putting your IRL name at risk. Not ever worth it. Saw bored adults wanting to give drugs to little kids to see what they would do while high. Couldn't intervene legally but was able to use normal social discouragement and shaming to stop them. Specifically, there was one girl who thought it would be hilarious to get a little kid high. The kid was probably about 10 or 11. Exactly the age you should never be doing drugs. She seemed really oddly excited about it. Like it was the best idea in the world or the most exciting thing she had ever come up with. And the other guy with her just wanted to appease her to get in her pants. Or had no morals. Or whatever, so nobody in this group of people thought to stop it or say no. Come on, accept me. Some things are just wrong. I don't really have anything against adults using drugs personally, but giving them to young kids is about the most trashy thing you could do. A trafficked woman overdosed on Xanax and God knows what being thrown over a shoulder to get her to her private porn shoot at 3 AM at a motel. I had to help do her hair and makeup while she was unconscious in the back seat. I still cry to this day thinking about her, and many others. But she was one of the women held in that house that was prostituting for years on her own. She'd seen worse and chose worse. If I stopped it then. The young innocent girls taking ads for hot girls wanted. Free trip to Miami to be a model. 1K a day would have been screwed. The guy is still trafficking and exploiting young naive women. He just changed his house and agency name once the FBI came in randomly. We did not call them. The US only wants to go after the ones that have women under 18. He gets them at 18 and one day, no joke, he'll make them wait an hour or two to board their flight so they're legal. I was told to pull out once they realized the girls being drugged and raped were over 18. I have nightmares every night about it. Some of those girls have never been seen again.